3 days ago, a United States Air Force aircraft went down over Iraq. 6 Americans are dead. And the Pentagon's explanation, what little there is of one, raises more questions than it answers. This wasn't a fighter jet. This wasn't a drone. This was a massive refueling aircraft, operating in what U.S. military officials themselves are calling friendly airspace. And the cause of the crash is still officially unknown. In the middle of an active war, with Iran in the crosshairs and American aircraft filling the skies over the Middle East, a KC-135 Stratotanker vanished from the sky near the Iraqi-Jordanian border. And the story the Pentagon is telling, and more importantly, the story it isn't telling, deserves your full attention right now. At approximately 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Eastern Time on March 12, 2026, a Boeing KC-135R Stratotanker crashed in western Iraq, near the town of Turaibil, right on the border between Iraq and Jordan. All 6 crew members aboard were killed. A second KC-135, operating alongside the first during the same mission, declared an emergency and ultimately landed in Tel Aviv, Israel. The Israeli ambassador to the United States, Yeshiel Later, confirmed that landing on social media. Flight Radar 24 data corroborated the emergency declaration. U.S. Central Command, CENTCOM, the military headquarters overseeing operations across the Middle East, confirmed the crash within hours. But in the days that followed, the information flow slowed to a trickle. Initially, the Pentagon confirmed 4 crew members dead, while rescue operations continued for 2 others. By March 13th, the full picture was confirmed. All 6 Americans aboard were gone. The names came later, after families were notified, as military protocol requires. Major John Klinner, 33 years old, a pilot from the 6th Air Refueling Wing at MacDill Air Force Base in Tampa, Florida. He had been deployed for less than 1 week. He left behind 3 children, 7-month-old twins and a 2-year-old son. Captain Ariana Savino, 31, also from MacDill, a pilot who had logged 348 combat hours and earned both the Air Medal and the Air and Space Commendation Medal. Tech Sergeant Ashley Pruitt, 34, an instructor boom operator, the specialist who physically manages the refueling connection between aircraft. Captain Seth Koval, 38, a KC-135 instructor pilot from the 121st Air Refueling Wing at Rickenbacker Air National Guard Base in Columbus, Ohio, who had served since 2006 and earned a degree from Purdue University. Captain Curtis Angst, 30 years old, also from Rickenbacker, and Tech Sergeant Tyler Simmons, 28, a boom operator, the youngest of the 6 people, from 2 different bases, from both the active duty Air Force and the Air National Guard, in 1 aircraft. Gone. But what happened to that aircraft, and why, is where this story becomes far more complicated. What U.S. officials are saying is almost as striking as what they are not saying. Joint Chiefs of Staff Chairman General Dan Kane confirmed on March 13th that the crash was, in his words, not the result of hostile or friendly fire. CENTCOM echoed that assessment. The loss occurred, they said, in friendly airspace during a combat mission. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth called the 6 crew members American heroes at a press conference on March 13th and said, and this is a direct quote, "War is hell, war is chaos. And as we saw yesterday with the tragic crash of our KC-135 tanker, bad things can happen." That statement, from the Secretary of Defense of the United States, is the most specific explanation the American public has received about how 6 service members died. The investigation, officials say, is ongoing. But CBS News, citing U.S. officials speaking on background, reported that American investigators believe the incident may have involved a mid-air collision. That detail, still not officially confirmed, matters enormously, because there were 2 KC-135s operating in the same airspace on the same mission. One came down, one limped to Tel Aviv. And no one in an official capacity has explained how that happened or what the connection between the two aircraft might be. That gap between what is confirmed and what is being withheld is where questions are building fast. This crash is not happening in a vacuum. It is happening inside a larger, active, declared military operation, one that most Americans may not even be fully aware of. Operation Epic Fury launched on February 28, 2026, as a joint U.S. and Israeli military campaign targeting Iran. That is not speculation. That is the stated operational framework from U.S. military officials. And the KC-135 that went down on March 12th was conducting a combat air refueling mission in direct support of those operations. In the roughly 2 weeks since Epic Fury began, the United States military has suffered what can only be described as a significant run of losses for a conflict that has received limited, sustained domestic news coverage. 3 F-15 fighter jets were shot down in what officials described as an apparent friendly fire incident over Kuwait, though all 6 crew members ejected safely. 6 U.S. service members were killed in an Iranian strike on Kuwait. 1 was killed in Saudi Arabia. Another died from a non-combat incident. And now 6 more in this crash. The total U.S. military death toll connected to operations in this conflict stands at approximately 13 as of March 15th. At least 4 U.S. aircraft have been confirmed lost. Roughly 140 American service members have been injured, 8 of them severely. These are not small numbers for a conflict that has been underway for less than 3 weeks. And yet, the strategic logic of American involvement is straightforward to map. Even if the tactical details are tightly controlled, Iran has been a central target of American and Israeli military pressure for years. Multiple sources, including the White House, have tracked well over 170 Iran-backed attacks on U.S. military forces in the Middle East between 2023 and 2024 alone. By the time Epic Fury launched in late February 2026, those attacks had slowed. But the underlying tensions had only sharpened. The operation marks a qualitative shift from proxy skirmishes and targeted strikes to something that looks and functions more like a coordinated air campaign. And refueling aircraft like the KC-135 are the unglamorous but absolutely essential backbone of that kind of sustained air campaign. You cannot keep fighter jets and bombers in the air over Iran without them, which means they are not just support assets. In a high-tempo air war, they are strategic assets. The decision to launch Epic Fury reflects months of planning and a deliberate calculation by Washington and Jerusalem that the moment had arrived to act. The aircraft losses and casualties in the opening weeks reflect the reality that no air campaign, no matter how carefully planned, unfolds cleanly. The international response to the KC-135 crash has been notable primarily for what it is not. The United Nations has issued no formal statement specific to this loss. Iraq's government, on whose territory the aircraft came down, has offered no public comment. The United States Congress, as of March 15th, has convened no formal hearings and issued no collective statement on the deaths. Individual lawmakers have expressed condolences on social media. That is the sum total of legislative engagement with the deadliest single aviation loss in the early weeks of this conflict. Iran's response has been the opposite of silence, but its claims carry serious credibility problems. Iran-backed militia groups operating under the banner of the Islamic Resistance in Iraq broadcast claims that they had targeted the KC-135 with a missile. That claim was made publicly on the record without supporting evidence. CENTCOM and General Kane directly and explicitly contradicted it. The official U.S. position, no hostile fire, no friendly fire, is stated with high confidence, though the investigation itself remains open. Iran and its proxies have a documented history of making inflated or false battlefield claims during periods of military pressure. This appears to be another instance of that pattern. but the fact that the claim exists and that it is being repeated across Iranian state media and in some regional press outlets means it is circulating and shaping perceptions in parts of the world where CENTCOM's credibility is not the default standard. Israel has been quieter on the specifics. Ambassador Leiter's post, confirming the second KC-135's safe arrival in Tel Aviv, was brief and factual. No Israeli government official has commented publicly on the nature of the joint mission or the circumstances of the loss. That restraint is consistent with how both governments have handled operational details during Epic Fury. Information that would reveal mission profiles, routing, or the degree of Israeli involvement in specific sorties is being held tightly. The Pentagon's own posture has been minimal disclosure, maximum deference to the investigation that is legally and procedurally defensible. It is also, in the context of 6 families waiting for answers, extraordinarily difficult. Defense Secretary Hegseth's press conference on March 13th was the highest-profile official engagement with this loss. The phrase, "war is hell, war is chaos, and bad things can happen," will be the quote attached to this story for a long time. Whether that framing, accepting, resigned brief is sufficient accountability for the loss of 6 crew members in unexplained circumstances is a question that is beginning to move beyond military families and into wider public discourse. On the ground in western Iraq, near Turaibil, the wreckage of an aircraft, individual unit costs vary widely, and operational and sustainment costs over decades are substantially higher than any original purchase price, came to rest in territory where the United States maintains a complex and often uncomfortable military relationship. Iraq hosts roughly 2,500 American troops under Operation Inherent Resolve, the counter-ISIS mission that has been ongoing for over a decade. KC-135s routinely operate out of Al-Assad Air Base in Iraq and Al-Udeid Air Base in Qatar to support regional air operations. The crash location near the Iraqi-Jordanian border places the wreckage in a part of western Iraq, where Iran-backed Popular Mobilization Forces, militia groups with ties to Tehran and a history of hostility toward the American military presence, operate with relative freedom. The families of the 6 crew members received their notifications before the public confirmation of all deaths. That 24-hour hold, standard Department of Defense protocol, meant that for a full day, a small number of people in Columbus, Ohio, and Tampa, Florida, and wherever these service members called home, knew what the rest of the country did not. Major Klinner's children are too young to understand what happened. His twins will not remember him. That human fact sits underneath every official statement, every press conference, every carefully worded CENTCOM release. The KC-135 itself deserves a moment of context because understanding what was lost matters. The Stratotanker has been flying for more than 60 years. It is derived from the same Boeing 707 airframe that powered commercial aviation's golden era, an era that has long since passed, while the KC-135 keeps flying. The U.S. Air Force currently operates 376 of them, 151 on active duty, 163 with the Air National Guard, and 62 with the Air Force Reserve. The Air National Guard component is significant because it means these missions are not being flown exclusively by full-time active duty personnel. Guard and reserve crews, people with jobs, families, and civilian lives, are rotating into active combat missions as part of this conflict's air campaign. Captain Koval and Captain Angst and Tech Sergeant Simmons were all from the 121st Air Refueling Wing at Rickenbacker, an Air National Guard unit out of Columbus. They were Guard members. That detail matters to communities across the country who may not fully realize that National Guard aviation units are directly embedded in an active air war in the Middle East right now. The last major KC-135 crash before this one occurred in Central Asia in 2013. More than a decade passed. The platform, for all its age, had compiled a strong safety record over those years, which makes the silence around the cause of this crash harder to sit with. when an aircraft with that safety record goes down, especially under circumstances where both hostile fire and friendly fire are ruled out. The possibilities narrow. Mechanical failure, catastrophic systems malfunction. Or, as CBS News reported U.S. officials privately believe, some form of mid-air collision with the second KC-135 that was operating in the same airspace. If that is what happened, the implications reach beyond this single tragedy and into the broader question of how air operations are being managed during a high-tempo, multi-nation conflict over a contested and congested airspace. The global impact of this incident extends along several lines simultaneously. Energy markets have already registered the broader instability of Operation Epic Fury. Any conflict that puts American and Israeli military assets in sustained engagement against Iran-linked targets generates immediate anxiety in oil markets, because Iran sits astride the Persian Gulf and has previously threatened to disrupt shipping through the Strait of Hormuz, the choke point through which roughly 20% of the world's traded oil passes. Disruption there translates directly to fuel prices in the United States, to shipping costs on goods that travel by sea, and to broader inflationary pressure in an economy that is already sensitive to energy shocks. For American military families specifically, this crash is a reminder that the risks of this conflict are not abstract. They are showing up in casualty notifications, in flag-draped coffins, in children who will grow up without a parent. 13 Americans are now confirmed dead in less than 3 weeks of operations. The operational tempo, with multiple aircraft lost and hundreds injured, reflects a conflict that is more intense than the limited public framing has sometimes suggested. People with family members deployed to the region or to bases that support these operations are watching these numbers closely. Congressional silence is itself a political story. No hearings, no votes on the use of military force, no formal authorization debate on record. The War Powers Resolution requires the President to notify Congress within 48 hours of deploying forces into hostilities. Whether that notification fully accounts for the scope of what Operation Epic Fury has become, and whether Congress is prepared to exercise its oversight role as casualties mount, is a question that has not yet found its moment in Washington. It may find that moment soon. What comes next is genuinely uncertain in ways that matter. The investigation into the KC-135 crash is ongoing, and the results, whenever they are released, will have real consequences. If the cause turns out to be a mid-air collision, the Air Force will face immediate pressure to review its formation procedures and communication protocols during high-density air operations. If it is mechanical, it raises questions about the airworthiness of an aging fleet being pushed hard in active combat. Either answer will generate accountability demands that the current posture of minimal disclosure is only delaying. On the broader conflict front, Operation Epic Fury has shown no signs of winding down. Iran has not stopped its retaliatory messaging, even if the militia claims about this crash are not credible. The 3 F-15 lost over Kuwait to what appears to be friendly fire. The 6 killed in the Iranian strike in Kuwait. The losses now in Iraq. The casualty picture is accumulating at a rate that will eventually force a more public accounting. Military analysts watching the conflict are focused on the next 48 to 72 hours, as a window in which additional Iranian responses, through proxies in Iraq, through direct action, or through information operations, are considered elevated risks. The families of Major Klinner, Captain Savino, Tech Sergeant Pruitt, Captain Koval, Captain Angst, and Tech Sergeant Simmons are not waiting for a strategic analysis. They are waiting for a real answer. They deserve one. And so far, the United States government has not provided it. That gap, between what happened in the sky over western Iraq on March 12th and what has been officially explained, is where this story remains, unresolved, unacknowledged at the level it demands, and growing harder to ignore.